What's going on, guys, and welcome back to yet another meta deck report for the month of July. Let's talk the top 20 best decks to be using right now in Marvel Snap, both in Conquest and the ladder. Now, this time I spent an enormous amount of energy upgrading the deck's graphics, and you can now see the deck's win rate, the average cubes per match, and my personal rating for the deck in Conquest, giving them a 1 through 5 stars. Now, in the July meta, we have a few kind of top-tier premier decks that are kind of well above the rest, and it all starts with Kitty, Bounce, and really Bounce decks in general. Now, this specific build is definitely the tip of the spear, in my opinion. The use of Iron Man, Hitmonkey, Angela, Kitty Pryde, just enormous power, and it's all fueled by Bast. This deck is great for dancing in and out of priority, making it very hard to counter, and it can produce power numbers that can rival pretty much any deck out there. This is going to be the best of the best to use in both ladder and Conquest, and it is at the top of the meta for July. Closely after, we have 3 different decks that all have the big bad that pretty much everybody bought, and that is High Evo. Now, High Evo is somewhat easy to counter. You know what they're going to do most of the time, and there's not a huge amount of variance in the specific deck shells. Now, we got to start with the High Evolution Jane Jaw deck, and this is the premier Lockjaw deck out of all of the bunch. Now, you've got the use of Wasp that has a great purpose under High Evo. Combination with Thor and Jane, you can go and cycle multiple Wasps. You get Mjolnir to power up Thor a ton of times, and in the process, you're also getting just big power on the board. And then you have pressure cards like Dracula. The power that this thing can produce is reliable, taking us back to kind of the early Thanos meta days. I mean, this thing is an absolute unit and very strong. If you want to know how to pilot the deck with a full turn-by-turn, you can check in the right-hand corner above. Now, our next High Evo deck is going to be the Control version, and this is all about shutting down lanes and then winning one with the massive Hulk. This deck is very hard to counter if you don't have the specific build to beat it. This is kind of the master control deck of the July meta. You have cards that want to have their energy skipped via Sunspot and obviously the Hulk. We have Jeff making things a lot more consistent for us while making it harder for the opponent as we team up the X-Men in Storm and Cyclops. Pretty much GG, and you have the lane if you can get that combo down. And then to wrap up the High Evo decks, I'm sure people are sick about them, but we've got the pure High Evo deck that has been played a massive amount of times, probably one of the most played decks this season. The deck's got a great average cube rate. The win rate is through the roof. And guys, all these energy skipping cards alongside this Hazmat Luke Cage combo, it's very tough to beat. We have She-Hulk to combine with Sunspot and Misty Knight and all the passive energy skipping. Also, Cyclops and Hulk will take advantage of that. And then we've got Hazmat and the Thing to get negative power pushed on the board to get a free Abomination. Luke is going to help us against High Evo counters. And then we have Rogue to go against all the strong ongoing decks at the moment. The deck is consistent. It shines in curve. Massive amount of power being able to be slammed. And then with the dip in Luke Cage and overall play rate, it's just exceeding more and more. Moving on from High Evo, we have a deck that is back, and it's one of the most straightforward ones to play in the game. With the buff to Red Skull, Shuri Sauron is back in the meta, and honestly, just as good as ever. In Marvel Snap, sometimes you don't need to make things so complicated, and this is as straightforward as you get. You want to play your cards on curve, you want to snap when you get Sauron, and just by playing Shuri and then playing a big card like Typhoid or Red Skull, or even skipping to 6 and playing She-Hulk, you follow all those up with Taskmaster for an easy win, the easiest win of your life with the deck. Putting out 2 lanes with 28 power is just freaking ridiculous, and then even if you don't get your perfect pulls, you have things like Zero and Ebony Maw, and then Zero and Red Skull, which is still 17 power. Taskmaster copying any of these are great, and then Sunspot to float with She-Hulk. Now, lastly on the deck, this is probably one of the best ones to go up against Bounce because of the verticality of power that it comes with. Very hard to match just 28 power in any lane, and if you pick the right ones, you're going to get the W. Next up, guys, we go to another deck that had a nerf, and it's still back, and it's a high-performing one. It does struggle against Bounce, but it can beat pretty much anything else out there. And it can go toe-to-toe with Bounce decks, and that is the good Stat Flood deck, and that is Stature, Darkhawk, and just pushing out high-value stats for cheap. We have discounted cards like Miles Morales and Stature. Silk is out and is a consistent offer of 5 power. Jeff and Versatility, Korg and Rockslide to boost up the Darkhawk, and then, of course, Luke Cage to go head-to-head with the High Evo decks. One of my favorite things about the deck as well is Black Bolt Can be a great way to counter a Kitty Pryde deck. They've been building it up this whole time. And then on turn 5, you can sometimes sneak the discard, and it can be pretty damn solid. This is another one I just put a deck guide out, so if you want to know kind of how to operate the deck, you can check in the top right-hand corner. Now, of course, the counter deck is still floating around the meta. Sera Control has always been a good deck, and it ruled the meta for a long time. And it's still a very good deck, right? Anything that's built to counter everything out there is naturally strong. And guys, we've got everything in this deck to take care of business. We've got the Killmonger, the Shang-Chi, Enchantress, Hitmonkey for power, Scarlet Witch for variance, and then our very own Kitty Pryde. This is that catch-all deck, right? The one that if you don't know what to play, it's always good to master, and Sera Control is still on top. Now, pretty much every season, we have Silver Surfer that is just never respected for what it can do, and we're getting more and more 3-costs that are providing great value. Now, Shadow King, his days of being a mock meme card are gone. The guy's just straight up legit against Kitty Pryde, Angela, and Bishop, and Shuri metas that are out there at the moment. And then, obviously, we have a bunch of counter cards to help us go against high Evo, Goose to shut down lanes, and then, of course, Brood and all the 3-cost cards to pump out enormous power. Best of all, a ton of flexibility in the deck. I really think that you guys can experiment. Nova and Goose can be swapped out, guys, for pretty much any 2-cost, 1-cost combo. Make sure you have a couple of them in the deck. And then having the Sera play is just too reliable. You know, you can take her out, but having 3 plays of 3-cost cards typically can win you most games. This build doesn't have it, but Dazzler is one of my favorite additions in the deck. It naturally floods up anyway, and she can get to the Maximus Polaris amount of stats. It can be tough to find the placement because Shadow King is kind of that flex spot. But if you want even more power, try out Dazzler in the deck. Moving on, Reveal Ramp definitely took a hit with the Dr. Doom nerf, and the Odin combination is having way less power than usual. Deck overall is just still absolutely filthy. Spider-Ham has helped have an early turn counter. Nebula just builds up in power, so you have these kind of early turns that made it a lot better. And then, of course, what it does best, and that is Sandman and Wave to counter the bounce decks and most decks out there that are trying to play multiple cards. If they don't have Cosmo, Black Panther, Arnim Zola pretty much is a win, and then you have Leader to match their place, a get-out-of-jail-free card with Galactus, and then the Odin Doom combo if you need to go wide. This deck has got it all, and another deck that I just did a guide recently that you can check out again in the top right corner. Now, speaking of Galactus, the deck has not left the meta deck report. In fact, I kind of like the build better than ever. We're focused on pushing negative power on the opponent's side with alternate win conditions in Destroyer, Nimrod and his new buff alongside Shuri and or Galactus. The deck's got it all. You can throw in Noel, of course, and Shang-Chi, and there's different builds out there. There's a lot of ways to build your Galactus deck, whether you're going with more of a build like this to go for a push and negative power and capitalize on the Shuri Nimrod spread, or if you want to go the classic route with Noel, Shang-Chi, and the Doc Ock. Now, still quite possibly one of the hardest decks to learn, but I think it's easily one of the best if you commit still, and it's even better than ever and slept on, and that is Move decks. Now, Move Wave is my personal favorite. We've got a deck to counter bounce out there that you're going to see majority of the time. We have Arrow in the deck to counter the Hulk plays that we see, and then, of course, we capitalize off of all this movement going on, building up Dagger, Vulture, and Human Torch. There are plenty of ways to build the deck and add in different additions. Doctor Strange can be for Juggernaut or other disruption cards. This deck is a certified banger, and if you want to know how to master Move, I'll put that down in the description. Of course, I respect your time, so I want to just cut right to the chase, and that's to say thank you guys. We are about to hit 100,000 subs on this channel. About 9 months ago, we created this thing, and funny enough, within days of my first son being born, which was a whole nother story, but it was both challenging and the most fulfilling thing I've ever gotten to do in my life. You guys legit made a dream of mine that I thought would never happen become a reality, and it's freaking crazy, to be honest. And to be candid, it's tough. It's nerve-wracking to be a YouTuber, mainly because I'm obsessed and extremely passionate about putting the best thing out there and making content, but also like providing for my family and you know, committing to do this full-time with the security. Now, I've had a lot of people ask, and with all this, guys, I am going to be opening up YouTube memberships today. Now, this is a way that you guys can help support me continue to do this full-time, but also it's not just about financial support, but also just inspiring me to take more risks and do new content. With my main videos, those are not going to stop, but I never want to waste your time, give you exactly what you're looking for, and make it like as informative and high production as possible. But with this, I can do more kind of casual bonus content to you guys, like tier list, conquest runs, deck guides, different things that I don't release here on the main channel. And then also like podcast interviews, like a lot of collab content. So it's just a way to say thank you guys for supporting me and having belief in me as a creator. From the bottom of my heart, I suck at these things. But from the bottom of my heart, guys, like, thank you. It really means a lot, and I'm looking forward to the months, years, or whatever it is. I'm going to enjoy the journey while it lasts, and thanks to you guys, I get to do that for the foreseeable future. Now, getting back to the meta deck report, this next deck, we've got the Shield Collector. Now, this deck is all about, obviously, random card generation, boosting up the collector to enormous numbers, and then having counters at your side as well. This makes it very difficult for the opponent to know exactly what cards you have. Giant discounts with Quinjet and Zabu, and then, of course, we've got America Chavez to thin the deck out and make everything a little bit better. And then best of all, Nick Fury can provide 6-cost cards like even Galactus that can surprise your opponent for the win. Now, like all decks, we do have replaceable cards and things like Devil Dinosaur instead of Chavez if you don't care about more of that consistency, or you can swap out Sentinel for Maria Hill and other options like that. This out of all the decks is definitely like the sleeper. I think if you haven't tried it out, you got to give it a test. For the first time in a long time, we've got a pure destroy deck that is extremely consistent, great at cube gain, and the win rate is not bad for some of the most games played this season. And your eyes do not deceive you. Deadpool is in the deck, and Sabretooth. We have both of these cards being built up by Nova. Bucky Barnes and Carnage are always there for the power. Wolverine is great to scale up, and then Killmonger is best used in this deck than any other deck because it gives you something for yourself and it counters the opponent. And you can replace cards like Arnim Zola, you can do Destroyer, Nimrod, go crazy, this thing slaps. Now, who would I be if I didn't sneak Rocks and Hawks into the meta deck report? Nick Fury in the buff only made it better, and the deck, stat-wise, is still easily top of the charts. Devil Dinosaur just brings that comfort, and it's going to work a lot like the Shield Collector deck, but with the use of Darkhawk, you get a bit more dependable power, and you get that disruption that everybody forgets about in the Rocks. It's called Hawks because we've got Mystique, and we can make multiple clones of Darkhawk, and then obviously Devil Dinosaur, and our other ongoing cards that Agent Coulson and Nick Fury generate. This is definitely one with variants as well. If you want to go with Iron Lad and or Moon Girl, feel free to go ahead and build the deck that you like to play. If you want Cosmo in there or other tech cards to help against decks that you struggle against, with this deck, do not be afraid to copy Quinjet, Zabu with your Mystique. That huge energy discount can be massive. That, of course, is if you don't have Devil Dinosaur or obviously Darkhawk. Now, I can't bring up Iron Lad without talking about the Iron Patriot. This is our strongest Patriot deck at the moment, and it's awesome in both Conquest and on the ladder. Guys, Patriot didn't go anywhere, and with the buff to Dazzler, the deck's only better. Onslaught is still one of the most slept on and disrespected cards in the game, and Iron Lad is going to have benefit off of most of the cards in here. Now, the deck works best when you hide things under Invisible Woman like Brood or Mr. Sinister, or you can go ahead and hide your ongoing cards like Blue Marvel and Onslaught. This all depends what Iron Lad copies, and then of course if you manage to copy Patriot, Iron Man, Blue Marvel, or Onslaught, you can go ahead and prepare your victory speech. Now, next up is Dependable Discard, and I've got a dedicated guide talking all about the deck, so I will be short. But guys, this is one of, if not the most consistent deck with knowing exactly the power you're going to push out. It's got a straightforward game plan, and it's one that if you learn to master, it's still pretty damn good. When this deck draws correctly, which is a lot of the time, pretty much any deck we've talked about before can and will struggle against it. And now there has been some cards released that are somewhat making it worse, but those are still very rare. And the deck is much better, in my opinion, in ladder than Conquest, but is definitely a premier deck. Now, the death of Thanos has been greatly exaggerated, guys. In Conquest especially, Thanos is still a very good deck, and as you guys know, fits into just about any archetype. Now, currently, I think ongoing Thanos is the best with the lack of Enchantress and Super Scroll out in the meta, and this is going to be the best Thanos deck to play at the moment, in my opinion. Now, it is a Lockjaw deck. You don't have to have Lockjaw if you like more dependability, but pretty much any option from Iron Lad is also good in the deck. But if you don't want to play something with ongoing, feel free to play Destroy Thanos, which is another deck that Killmonger thrives in to destroy your own stone and cheapen death. Get Null up there if you have him in the build. You have a bunch of fodder for Carnage and just an absolute beauty of a deck. Lastly, for Thanos, we do have a control version of the deck utilizing Green Goblin and some counter cards, and obviously Professor X and Daredevil, making it a good deck overall to give you a bunch of options, and the stones are just perfect under Professor X. You can boost them up with plenty of ways, and obviously Devil Dinosaur is the best card to go underneath Thanos. I'm going to say it again. We got a full deck guide in the description that I just released. It was my latest video on Thanos if you want to learn from two people that use the card a lot. Now, of course, I will mention reliable, good old Patriot here. This is the new Dazzler version without Iron Lad that you can also play. Obviously, Abomination. These cards were just good, consistent stats to build out wide. it can be strong. Obviously, Shuri is out there, and this deck can match it in power some of the time with Ultron and all the boosts to him. Strong deck overall, and definitely one that I recommend. Now, the last deck today is Toxic Clog, and this is going to be our Toxic deck with Debris, Sentry, Typhoid Mary, and it's that Sera Toxic that you guys maybe saw a few months back. It's a good performer. Doesn't have the highest win rate. It does depend on some draw, but overall, the deck is strong against bounce and some of these decks that are flooding the board. This is kind of that anti-flood deck. If you learn the ropes and you play it enough and you get consistent, it's definitely a good deck. So there you go. There's the top 20 decks to play in Marvel Snap. And again, guys, just thank you. Thank you a lot for helping me live the dream and continue to do this on a daily basis. I appreciate you guys stopping by. Good luck in the new season. And as always, until the next one, happy snapping.